He's also the Eisner nominated book, received an Eisner nomination for Who is Jake Ellis? It's actually soon to be a major motion picture from 20th Century Fox. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause for Nathan Edmondson! Hyderabad, you guys gotta make a little more noise than that, come on! We also have with us, he's the creator of Angry Mosh and he'll be moderating this session. Big round of applause for Abhijit Kini!
Hello, there we go. Can y'all hear me? Thank you for coming. See y'all later.
We aren't going to let you go that easy, Nathan. Everyone's here to listen to you about all the amazing titles you've had, and you've been giving us some real cool stuff all this while. So first things first, how's India treating you?
Great. India's treating me very well. The food, the fans, the people, the traffic. Traffic's been not so great, but everything else has been wonderful. We're loving our time here.
And we all love having you over. So here's to an hour of awesome session with you. And at the end of it, we'll have some question answers from the audience. I think you can have your questions ready. And Nathan here would be very happy to address them. So here we go. So Nathan, I mean, we heard about all those movie development plans that are happening. Who is Jake Ellis? Where is Jake Ellis? Let's go through the titles once again. So we have The Punisher, Black Widow. Who is Jake Ellis? Where is Jake Ellis? Dancer, Genesis, and so on. So when one goes through most of your stuff, maybe the first impression they might have is you are totally into the spy and espionage genre. But at the same time, you give us titles like Genesis and Dream Merchant, which are probably the polar opposites of what the other titles are.
Sure.
So let's begin right at the start. I mean, how did it all come together? What made you decide to become a comics writer?
I got into comics accidentally, very accidentally. I was not part of this. Like, I was not going to cons, and I was not, I didn't really grow up as exposed to comics as everybody here is now. Just by coming to this con, you know more about comics than I did when I started writing. Probably more than I do right now, but I'm trying. I worked in Washington, D.C. in the political field, but I knew I wanted to write, and I got to know some other comic creators, and I saw, like, I wanted to tell stories, and I didn't know where I wanted to tell stories or how I wanted to tell stories, but I knew I wanted to tell stories, like a lot of different kinds of stories. And I saw that in comics, it costs the same to tell a story about blowing up planets in space with 1,000 different species of aliens as it does to tell a story about two people sitting in a room talking for 20 pages. It's the same. It costs the same. So you can tell any story you want to tell in comics, and I started to see that there were titles like Why the Last Man that was... I thought, this is such a cool idea, and it is not what comics have been about for the last 30 years. Like, this is new fertile ground for radical storytelling, and I accidentally, kind of pitched a comic, and it got picked up. That was Olympus, and before I knew it, I was writing comics, and yeah.
All the geniuses here say that good things come out of accident. I think you might be agreeing to that.
Well, look, there's something to that. There's nothing in my life that is good that I planned. Like, everything good in my life happened by accident. So comics is certainly one of those things. Every title that I've published is like, everybody's like, well, how did that come about? How'd you come up with that story? I have no idea. I don't even know how, like, I was, people, like, a lot of the questions, like, just a spoiler, half the questions you're going to ask me, the answer's going to be, I don't know. Like, I just don't, I just stumble through it. There are professionals like Ron and Vivek, who know what they're doing. I don't know what I'm doing.
which is why the title's like, who is Jake Ellis and where is Jake Ellis?
Well, actually, the funny thing was, so here's an anecdote. So the reason that who is Jake Ellis, I'm from Augusta, Georgia, where the Augusta National is, the Masters. If any of you are golf fans. Are there any golf fans here? No, nobody likes golf in India, apparently. But there's a street called Jake Ellis Lane, and I grew up near that street, driving by it a lot, and one day I drove by and I thought, that's a cool character name. And I literally said out loud in the car, I said, all right, so if I'm going to tell a story about Jake Ellis, who is Jake Ellis? And then 2 hours later, I had the whole story worked out, just in the car driving home. But it came because I was like, who is, so one of my books may be called, What the Heck is This Story? Like, that's coming. Like, there's going to be some where I just ask it out loud and let the title go. But yeah, I mean, that was, in other words, it's a process title. That was the process, asking who is the character, right? And the joke is, every story ever could be titled something like that, right? Who is Odysseus? Right.
Pretty dramatic, actually. When you have a title like that, people know already there's some sort of suspense, some mystery to it. So I guess just to bring the people here up to speed, we can tell us a little bit about the book, the first book, which got an amazing amount of critical acclaim, which is Who is Jake Ellis? A little bit about the book and the kind of you have to hear the little gist about this. It's not your everyday thriller. It's a very, very different take on the whole genre. I think Nathan will be in a good position to tell you about what the book is about.
I don't need to. Everybody here has read it. Like, everybody. So, Who is Jake Ellis is a spy thriller about, like, this awesome spy. He's a mercenary. He's the best of the best at everything he does. But the reason he's so good is not because of who he is, but it's because there's an invisible guy next to him all the time named Jake Ellis who tells him what to do and how to do it. So if you can imagine, like, Jason Bourne meets Fight Club, having already seen Fight Club. So there's this guy that only he can see, which is awkward, if he goes to the bathroom or, he's talking out loud to himself at a restaurant or something. But the whole conceit is that even the lead character doesn't know who this invisible guy is. He thinks it's a figment of his imagination until he realizes maybe he can't trust him. So he has to start to try to figure out who is Jake Ellis and this person that I can't escape. Can I trust him? So, yeah.
And now there's a movie in the making. I think that'll be something that everyone here will be looking forward to. But how did that
You
come?
better be.
You better be, yeah. That's
Especially you.
You got that right. Anyway, how did the process of the book to film come across? I'm sure, a lot of people here want to know how a comic book story is taken up to make a movie out of it. People want to make a movie out of an amazing comic story.
Well, I now have 3 films in development from my comics, and then 1 TV series and 1 film from original screenplays I've written. So I work a lot. Thank you. I work a lot, on between comics and film, and the process is different every time. So, for example, with Who is Jake Ellis, we brought in a major filmmaker, David Yates. I say we brought him in. It's amazing. All of you know that. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm going to tell him. I went to Hyderabad, India, and you got applause as soon as I said your name. Obviously, more applause than I got. Yes, to David Yates. And when David came on board to the project, he said, there's one writer I want to write this. And he brought in a writer named Seth Lockhead. And he said, if Seth writes this, we're going to get the next Fight Club. He said, he's one of the most talented writers I know, and we want him to write it. And so, and then Seth just went off to write it. And I haven't read the draft yet. I think it's just about done. And I had nothing to do with the process. He just went off to do his thing. And I get to be excited and read it for the first time and see what he's done with the story. Maybe he's put it all on Mars and the characters are now, talking animals. I don't know what changes he's made, but I'm excited because I know how good he is and I know how brilliant this team is. So in this respect, they pick it up and they take and adapt it. Now, I can't say the title of one of my other books right now. We just got the screenplay written. We just got a film deal for it. And in that case, the Oscar-winning screenwriter, who's one of my favorite screenwriters in the industry, he wrote one of my favorite movies of all time, and I can't say what it is, but he would call me and say, hey, what do you think would happen in this scene? What do you think would happen in this scene? And after I like pushed my jaw back up that this screenwriter's calling asking me for ideas, it was a real collaboration. So I knew what the screenplay was before I got to finally read it. It was still exciting, but I was part of the process. So every deal and every project you approach, it just depends on the people involved and what kind of participation you'll have. And I'm a producer on those films and a producer on a TV series that we're working on, and that may mean something, but it also may not. What's important in writing the comic is that you create something that you put your heart and soul into, that you love, that has great art, and that you stand behind that, because you may not have the control over it moving forward. You do your best to make decisions, but what if the movie comes out and it's terrible? So you want to be able to stand behind what you originally created. So putting your heart and soul into the original piece, the comic, in this case, is what's most important. And so, that's what I try to do.
I think that's something we'll be looking forward to, especially knowing the fact that you are working hands-on with it. So at least the comic fans would be like, the movie is in safe hands then. At least there won't be those complaining that they've changed everything, it's not loyal to the comic book. I don't think that will be the case here, would it?
Well, but I don't have a problem with it if it is. If they change everything in the comic, guess what? I get a new experience. If it's exactly like the comic, then I'll say, I want to go and have a new experience. I want this screenwriter and this director to bring their own artistic vision to it. So I'm happy to play a part, but I'm also happy to see these new partners in the venture do their thing. And look, because everybody can say, oh, that comic adaptation movie was terrible or something. The reality is nobody sets out, and this is one of those things that we say in Hollywood a lot, nobody sets out to make a bad movie. So, a lot of people, I've had people who will call an agent and say, that movie that you just made was terrible. And it's like, well, sure, but nobody meant for it to be terrible. It's not like somebody woke up and said, I like that comic, I want to destroy it on film. They set out and they say, I love this comic, I want to do something. And maybe it works and becomes an amazing film, and, maybe not. But, that's just part of the ride. It's the same with comics. The comic may be good, it may not be.
So, tell us a bit about your early influences. I'm sure there have been quite a few, not just from a particular genre or a particular theme, but tell us what has influenced your writing from over the years, right from when you started, even if it was by accident. I'm sure there was something you liked somewhere that you kind of had.
There was nothing. I was abducted when I was 5 in a spaceship, and I have no memory until I was 25. No influences. My dad, when I grew up, when I was growing up, my dad it was very important to him that I read a lot of classic literature. He would read me Greek mythology and, things like Tolkien books, and that's what I grew up on. I also traveled a lot with my dad. And so, I was heavily influenced. I was also influenced by Michael Crichton's writing a lot. He was kind of a mentor to me. We talked about him a lot at dinner last night. I have a Crichton tattoo right here. So really the first thing is to go back to great books. The great, any writer today stands on the shoulders of giants and just tries to throw a leaf into the wind, really. And so to look back, and so those of you who want to be, great writers, or who are great writers and want to continue writing great things, go and read classic literature. You've got to go. It's like eating, real nutritious food, right? You have to go back. So that's my number one influence: traveling, and probably my biggest influence is fear of not being able to pay my bills. So let's talk about the titles like The Activity and The Dancer. These are pretty, they're pretty intense, the themes, the kind of writing. I won't really call it a spy and espionage only kind of a comic, but there has been an overtone of it, especially with The Activity. Is there a specific direction you take when you write spy and espionage stories? Because your writing does have a very different take on the subject than some other literature we've seen. There's definitely going to be a conscious thing you put into it. Well, this is one of the reasons it's important to read great works and to read a lot of different things, because when you become a creator, you're going to bring something unique. You don't want to be known as just another guy who wrote Spider-Man, for example. You want to be known as somebody who came into the medium or with a real unique vision, which is not to say that I have a real unique or interesting vision, but the point is, for me, I come in with some of the things that I was influenced by. A lot of people said, well, that will work in movies, but not comics. Nobody wants to read spy comics. And now Black Widow is huge. Everybody, it's been a hit. Mainly because of Phil Noto. I think we all knew that. But I don't know. I love spy stories. I love reading spy stories, watching spy movies. Some of my favorite films are espionage type films. I love, I've worked very closely with the military. I have military in my family, and so I'm really fascinated by that world, and I like to pay them, a kind of respect in some of my writing. But the more time I spend with them, the more amazing stories I hear. Like in The Activity, which this is a page in The Activity and another page in The Activity. The majority of stories in this book are based in reality. And not to say they're all real, but most of them are based in reality. Because we would talk to guys who'd done these insane things, and we would take their stories and put it into into our comic. And the amazing thing about this book was it started more fiction, but the more research we did and the more we talked to them, the more we wanted it to be closer to reality, because that was way more interesting. So I feel the same way about the spy world. I like to do like spy-fi, where there's a little of sci-fi in the spies, but I like it to be rooted in something that is very true to the world of espionage. And so, through that, I've developed friends, and I get to work with people at Langley and the CIA, and I'm talking, and actually, this is funny. The other day, I called somebody at the CIA, and I got their answering machine, and I almost left a joke message. But I hesitated because I thought, yeah, maybe this isn't the best idea. But yeah,
Let's hear what it was.
well, I hadn't thought of it. That was the problem. If I thought through, but I would have said something really stupid, and the next thing I knew, black helicopters would have been over my house. Nobody would have heard from me again. But my books would have started to sell a lot.
Since you brought it up, keeping things as close to reality as possible.
Yeah, she's so pretty, isn't she?
She is extremely pretty. I think Phil Noto's work, of course, has given a new life to the character along with your writing. I think you as a team have done a great job on Black Widow. For those of you who've seen it, I think it deserves a big round of applause. Because I think
Hold on, why aren't you clapping? All right.
clap. I think what you've done is you've taken one of the characters who have always been pretty much a supporting cast, not as strong a presence as probably the rest of the Avengers, but you kind of turned it around and have kind of created a universe for that character itself, where now she is the dominant character. How did that come about?
One of the things we said when setting out on Black Widow, one of the discussions we had is we were not going to tell a story about a woman trying to make it in a world of superhero men, right? This was not going to be about her compared to all the other heroes, and this was going to be about Black Widow being awesome. That's it. She's awesome, and that's the story we wanted to tell, right? She's Bond, but cooler, and so as soon as we said, we're just going to tell her story, honestly, it was easy. We just said, and look, let's be honest, I could write the script by drawing circles with crayons on the paper, and if Phil Noto illustrated it, everybody would still buy it, right? So it hardly matters what I do. But the point is, we just set out and said, we're not even going to think about the fact that she's considered a supporting character. We're just going to think about the fact that we think she's awesome. And that's the story we told. So luckily it resonated. People liked it.
So, apart from Black Widow, talk to us about Punisher. Your take on it and the way you have seen the character for all these years, and what were the conscious efforts in weaving in something that you had in mind with the storyline?
Well, Mitch and I were offered I was offered a number of Marvel books, and I wanted to work with Mitch, and I said, okay, this is the one we want to do. We want to do Punisher. We had not seen a take on Punisher that showed him using really grounded military tactics. So all of what we had learned working on the activity, we brought to the Punisher, and down to the details of the weapons he used and the kind of tactics, bringing in the Howling Commandos as a new elite Black Ops team in the Marvel Universe. That was one of the, that was so cool for us. Like, the Howling Commandos are back, and guess what? They've got night vision goggles, and they're jumping from helicopters. And the other big thing we did, obviously, is we brought the Punisher to LA. He's in LA now, and part of it was because we thought we're always saying, well, it's because we needed a fresh take and we needed new scenery, and that's true, but it's mainly because I don't know New York and I know LA. So, if I'd written him in New York, he would have been at Sbarro all the time eating pizza, because I just don't know New York. But I do know LA, so he can eat at all kinds of different restaurants. Which is a joke, because if you're reading The Punisher, he's always eating at one diner. And we did a signing. It's called the Nickel Diner. We went down there and did a signing, and they made these shirts that say, "I punished the Nickel Diner" and stuff. It was a lot of fun. Look, we approached the Punisher and said, we don't care what people expect. We're just going to tell the story that we want to tell, And we were lucky that we weren't, killed with spears.
Since you brought up the fact that you know LA so well, and, you've been using those little anecdotes around. You've also covered quite a lot of ground across the world, because, for example, in Olympus, you have the characters going across Greece, Europe. Even in the activity, you have settings all across the world, and you are pretty accurate with whatever local themes you've shown in it. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of criticism towards this should have been that way or that should have been this way. How do you go about this usage of locales from around the world, keeping the theme alive? I mean, there's some amount of serious research behind it, I'm sure.
Well, part of it is credit due to the artist. In the activity, for example, every single location we go to, whether it is Beirut, Afghanistan, whether it's Colombia, whether it's Canada, every single location you see, every street the characters walk down is a real street in that place. And that's not because of me, that's because Mitch, just doesn't have anything better to do. And decided to really, do his research. Look, I've lived in a number of places in the world. I used to live in Europe. I've traveled a lot. And so some of it comes from just having experienced the world, but a lot of it just comes from, Google, frankly. But we know, like with a book like The Activity, we have to be authentic to the locations because we're trying to tell a story that feels real.
Yeah, because that stuff is much more than Google, I think. There's a serious amount of research, and it shows in the kind of writing and the work.
Sure. So you can't have the characters drop into Djibouti and go to Walmart, right? Like you have to be accurate to the world so that people are with you and say this feels real. Plus, with The Activity, we have a lot of military readers, and if we get some of that stuff wrong, like military details, they drop the book quick because they have a sensitivity to, if you're a doctor and you're telling a story about, a hospital and you get a lot of details wrong, as a doctor, you're going to throw it down because it doesn't feel right to you. So, so we try to be accurate for that reason, but, yeah.
So now that you come to India and you've seen the place around, can we expect some India?
I'm gonna base some stories in Hyderabad very soon. Spoiler alert, they're going to be boring because it's just going to be somebody stuck in traffic at rush hour in the rain.
We'll do something about that. Unless the black helicopters come and help us out somewhere. Okay, let's come to Genesis with Image.
Okay.
I think, personally, according to me, I think that's a very different story structure that you've tried. The narration is a little different than the other works you have done. And in fact, it really stands out in the kind of storytelling that you have always been doing. And then there's Genesis, according to me. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, well, look, there are a lot of different kinds of stories I want to tell. Genesis is more of a fantasy, high sci-fi kind of story. The Dream Merchant is in that vein too. Olympus is an action thriller, but it's rooted in this mythology. I like telling these stories. Part of it is a conscious career decision that when people were really responding to my spy type material, I just keep doing that. keep thinking a story's there because people are still buying them. Suckers. The other thing is like Genesis, for example, is a really tough story to sell. So there's no, it's not something we can make into an ongoing series very easily. So I just found the right time in my publishing docket to do a smaller contained story. But I'm constantly, there's all kinds of stories I want to tell. There's one story, we were talking about dinner last night. I started a screenplay that I really, really want to write about a Scottish hunter named Jim Corbett. And it's all about his time in India. And in fact, one of the places that I really need to come back and visit is the Corbett National Park. But I'm fascinated by, I have his journals, and I loved it. So that's, but it's hard to sell. It's hard to sell and hard to pitch a period piece like that. About a tiger hunter in India. It's not, it's not like a Jason Bourne or Transformers that is easy to sort of get up and sell. So that's kind of a passion project. I'll find the right time, and I'll really work hard on it and try to sell it. But you have to move your best sellers up front and be strategic about when to do others.
We'll be waiting for that too. I think that'll be a very interesting read. So I hope that comes out pretty fast.
We'll see. I've been working on it for a while.
Let's come down to the actual technicalities, if I may, while you're writing your stories. For example, character creation or character development. For example, if you're starting from scratch on a particular story and you have to develop a set of characters, what's your process behind developing your main characters, the villains? Is there an amount of themes or any kind of influences that you have in mind, inspirations?
Yeah, I mean, when I start a book, I start to ask questions about the character. Who is this character? What defines them? What do they want most in the world? Do they want to cope, or do they want to conquer an empire? Like, what do they really want? What gets in their way? Like, why do they have a problem getting it? And what kind of person, when they're faced with different adversity, what are they going to do about it? So when you start asking questions about a character, you start to get to know them. It's like being on a first date with that character. You sit across, you start asking questions and getting to know, that character. And then I get to know characters a lot as I start to write them. And there's this thing where when you're writing a character, you get to a point where that character becomes alive in the story. I call it the terrarium effect, where you've put animals in a terrarium, and so you go out and you catch them, then you put them in a tank and you just watch them. Because once the character becomes alive, it's like you've got him in a terrarium. The book is your aquarium, your terrarium, and you sit there and watch them, and you just describe what they're doing. So it's like, all right, what happens if I, now put a mouse in there with my, with my character, and you start to describe. Then the character would do this. When you get to know them, they become alive, beyond you. And so that's the goal: is to get to a point where your character is alive. And then you blow them up.
Right there. And you touched upon a point at the start saying that comics allows you to show and narrate a story much in a better way than probably, and a smaller budget than probably a movie or a TV show would cost. In a way, would it be fair to say comics would give you a bigger canvas to play around?
Well, it's tricky. It's certainly easier to have a big canvas in comics. Like I said before, it costs the same to tell whatever kind of story. But then it's on you. Like, a budget can actually make better storytelling. Kind of like in poetry, if you have to constrain things to certain syllables, it's going to force you to think more and become more creative with each line, right? The same if you have a budget. Okay, all right, I only have 20 pages to tell this story. And if you're telling a movie, all right, we've only got, 10 million or 20 million to do this. So you have to make a lot of decisions about the best way to express the story with what you have. That is to say, if you just run wild with it, your story may suffer. So you have to impose boundaries on yourself in telling a story in comics.
Is there any particular situation in your writing your comics, your series, that you have felt, oh man, what do I do now? The character is in a situation, it's so tight, I don't know how he's going to get out of it. I'm sure you have come across
like every day. Yeah, I walk away from my desk and take a walk and try to forget about it and come back and be like, that's the problem. I should erase everything and start over.
So, I mean, that's a piece of advice. I think budding artists and writers in the crowd can just make a note of that. Just a small walk. Everything sets itself. So, let's talk, I mean, 3 things to keep in mind when one has to write good comics. 3.
3 things to keep in mind when writing good comics. Remember your lead character's goals and motivations. I have no idea. I don't write good comics, so I don't know. Maybe, I would say this.
This is being too modest.
Yeah, I will say this. If you want to write comics, you have to make it a disciplined job. You have to sit down for 4 hours a day at the computer. You have to discipline yourself, because having an idea is not what's going to sell the story. What's going to sell the story is the fact that you sit in a chair and work at it, just like anything else, like restoring an engine, or clearing brush in a backyard, or painting a picture, or whatever. It's the hours that you put in sweating. So just to keep in mind that this is not a hobby. It's a job. Even if you have another job, you have to have a discipline. And I think that a lot of people approach writing in general without that. And the greatest writers of all time, they had a habit. They made it a job. So I don't know. 3 things I'd have to think about it. 3 things to keep in mind, because I don't know. For me, it's like just being sure I have coffee in front of me. But yeah,
let's make it 3 mugs of coffee.
3 mugs of coffee? That's
I think
like one third of what it takes for me to get through a day. But yeah.
Any forthcoming projects you'd like to just give us a little teaser about, comics-wise?
Yeah, I'm doing a book with Howard Chaykin next year. I have 3 or 4 creator-owned books coming out. We have Deathlock, which comes out this month. Yeah, with Mike Perkins. That one's cool. It's a lot of fun. I don't know what else I can say right now. I don't know. Just pay attention to my Twitter account or Facebook, and you'll see the announcements.
Tell us about Deathlock. I mean, again, a very new, fresh take on the character. I mean, I myself have the old trade paperbacks from way back then. But I think this is a very new character. Is it a reboot of sorts, or how do you go?
It's not really. I mean, it's a reboot in the sense that we're starting over from issue 1, but we're not changing everything that's happened before. In our Deathlock, there's a new guy named Henry Hayes. He's a Doctors Without Borders medic, where he goes into different war zones and things and takes care of people. At least that's what he thinks what he's doing. He doesn't realize he has a prosthetic leg, and he doesn't realize that the company that gave him this prosthetic leg, when he goes to, when he gets to Venezuela or Syria or wherever he's going to help injured people in the field, that he's actually being activated by this company to go and kill people or blow up trains or something. So he doesn't know that he's this weapon of war, this agent of death, because when he's done, they wipe his memory and send him home to his daughter, and he thinks he's been helping people. So the question is, what happens if he finds out who he is?
Very interesting. And if you have to just give out one message to aspiring writers, be it comics, be it prose, whichever writing, what is the one?
Follow me on Instagram.
There you have it. As simple as that. Big round of applause.